The county courthouse was buzzing that morning. Sunlight poured through tall, arched windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Neighbors, reporters, families, and curious onlookers who had come to witness yet another one of Judge Harrison's infamous rulings. The courtroom smelled faintly of old books and fresh coffee, the kind of place where silence carried a heavy weight. Bailiffs stood stiffly by the doors, their uniforms spotless, eyes scanning the room. The murmurs of the crowd rose and fell like waves until the judge entered. When Judge Harrison stepped in, the sound of the gavel silenced the room instantly. He was a tall man with sharp eyes, his black robe flowing behind him like a shadow. People leaned forward in anticipation, knowing he was about to deliver a sentence that could define a young man's life forever. At the defendant's table sat Marcus, a teenage boy barely old enough to drive. His hands gripped the edge of the wooden table so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He tried to steady his breathing, but every inhale felt shallow, every exhale shaky. Marcus wasn't hardened. He wasn't dangerous. He was scared, terrified of what was about to happen. His mother sat a few rows back, wringing a tissue in her hands, tears spilling down her cheeks. His lawyer whispered, "Stay calm, Marcus. No matter what happens, don't lose hope." But the words did little to comfort him. All Marcus could think about was his future slipping through his fingers. Judge Harrison had ruled on hundreds of cases, and his reputation was feared across the state. He was nicknamed the Iron Gavel because of his unforgiving sentences. Rumors swirled that he rarely granted second chances. Once he made up his mind, there was no turning back. The courtroom whispered with stories of young men who had stood in Marcus's place before. Some had received decades in prison, others sentences so harsh that even prosecutors were surprised. As the judge shuffled papers and adjusted his glasses, the entire room braced itself for what felt inevitable. The moment stretched unbearably. The prosecutor sat smugly, convinced the ruling was in his favor. The defense lawyer nervously tapped his pen against his notes. A clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second echoing through the room like a hammer. Marcus lowered his head, silently, praying for mercy. He could hear his mother quietly whispering his name from the gallery, her voice breaking with desperation. Even the bailiffs, normally stoic, exchanged glances, sensing the weight of what was about to be said. Judge Harrison finally leaned forward, his voice booming through the speakers. In the case of Marcus Johnson, for the crimes presented before this court, the sentence is— He paused deliberately, letting the tension rise. Life. Gasps erupted across the room. One woman clutched her chest in shock. Marcus's mother let out a wail that echoed in the chamber. The defense attorney slammed his hand on the table, whispering furiously, "This is outrageous!" Marcus felt as though the world had stopped spinning. His ears rang, his vision blurred. All he could hear was the echo of that single word, life. Marcus's lips trembled as he whispered to himself, "My life. It's over." His chest tightened, his heartbeat thundering against his ribs. He wasn't a hardened criminal, yet the punishment felt final, like a door slamming shut on everything he could have become. He glanced back at his mother, who mouthed, "Stay strong," though her tears betrayed her hope. His lawyer leaned close and whispered, "We'll fight this. I promise we'll fight this." But Marcus barely heard him. He could only think of one person who might understand the gravity of this injustice. His voice shook as he asked, "Can I call my dad?" The bailiff reluctantly allowed it. A phone was placed in Marcus's trembling hands. His fingers fumbled over the keypad as he dialed the familiar number. The courtroom, curious, leaned in, trying to catch every word. When his father's voice came on the line, Marcus nearly broke down. "Dad, they gave me life. Life. Please, you have to come. I don't know what to do." The silence on the other end was heavy. Then a calm but commanding voice replied, "Stay strong, son. I'm on my way. I'll be there before this ends." Marcus closed his eyes, clinging to the only thread of hope he had left. 15 minutes. Later, the heavy oak doors of the courtroom creaked open. The sound drew every head in the gallery toward the back. A tall man in a tailored navy suit walked in, his presence commanding attention before he even spoke. The crowd parted instinctively. As he moved forward, each step measured and confident. A silver badge clipped to his belt caught the light. Murmurs rippled through the room. "Is that—" Marcus's eyes widened. "Dad," he whispered. The man stopped in the center aisle, locking eyes with the judge. Gasps filled the air. As someone confirmed the whispers, "That's the U.S. Attorney General." And in that instant, Judge Harrison, the iron gavel, froze. The moment the U.S. Attorney General entered, the entire courtroom seemed to shift. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the prosecutor's confident smirk disappeared, replaced with unease. Judge Harrison's hand, still gripping the gavel, trembled ever so slightly. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and tried to regain composure. But his sharp gaze faltered when it met the man walking down the aisle. Everyone in the room knew the judge's reputation for being unshakable, but right now, his mask of authority cracked. For the first time, people saw not the iron gavel, but a man caught off guard. The Attorney General stopped beside his son. He placed a steady hand on Marcus's shoulder, the gesture filled with quiet strength. Marcus looked up, tears streaming. Down his face, whispering, "Dad, they gave me life." The man nodded calmly, his jaw tightening. Then he turned toward the bench. "Your Honor." His voice carried, firm yet controlled. "This case demands a second look." The gallery buzzed. People leaned toward one another, whispering furiously, "Did he just challenge the judge?" The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. In his seat, suddenly aware that this was no ordinary case. The Attorney General's very presence changed the atmosphere. Every eye in the courtroom was fixed on him. The bailiffs straightened their postures. Even the defense lawyer, moments ago defeated, now sat taller, confidence flickering back into his expression. Marcus's mother clasped her hands together, whispering prayers of gratitude. Her son was no longer standing alone. His father had arrived like a storm, sweeping away the despair. Judge Harrison tapped his gavel nervously. This courtroom will remain orderly," he stammered, though his voice lacked its usual edge. For years, Judge Harrison had prided himself on being unmovable. But as the Attorney General stared back at him, silent and steady, Harrison felt his authority slipping. He shuffled through his papers, buying time. "The ruling stands as declared. However," he trailed off, realizing that every eye was waiting, measuring his every word. The Attorney General finally spoke again, his voice calm but powerful. "Justice is not about severity, Your Honor. It is about fairness. This sentence does not reflect justice." The words hung in the air like thunder. The judge gripped the bench tightly, visibly rattled. After a tense pause, the defense was granted permission to reopen arguments. New evidence was introduced, details overlooked in the rush to convict. A witness who had never been called to. The stand came forward, describing events that painted Marcus in a very different light. The prosecutor, once so confident, fumbled with his notes. His voice lost its strength as inconsistencies in his argument were revealed. Murmurs swept the room as people realized the case had not been as clear as they once thought. Marcus's lawyer, emboldened, hammered each point with renewed energy. "Your Honor, this young man does not deserve life behind bars. He deserves a chance." The tension in the room was thick as Judge Harrison sat in silence, head bowed, deep in thought. Finally, he adjusted his glasses and spoke, his voice softer than before. The court recognizes that justice must be served with balance. In light of the new evidence and testimony, the sentence is hereby stayed. The case will undergo a full review. The gallery erupted in gasps of relief. Marcus's mother broke down in tears, sobbing into her hands. His lawyer exhaled heavily, his face finally showing a smile. Marcus, overwhelmed, whispered, "Thank you, Dad." His father squeezed his shoulder, whispering back, "You're stronger than you think. We'll get through this." The courtroom, which had started the day filled with despair and finality, now hummed with hope. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, and people whispered about how they had just witnessed a moment unlike any other, the iron gavel bending under the weight of true justice. As the Attorney General walked out with his son and wife, people moved aside respectfully. Some nodded, others whispered words of encouragement. Marcus felt the heavy burden on his chest lifting for the first time in months. On the courthouse steps, his father looked him in the eyes. "This isn't over yet, son. But today proved something important. Even the harshest judgment can be challenged when truth is on your side." Marcus nodded, his spirit rekindled. The crowd watched them leave, realizing they had just witnessed not only the power of authority, but also the deeper power of love, courage, and justice.